Over a campfire. Chapter 9. Wrong Direction. The central hall had been turned into a makeshift command center. The wide wooden room, usually echoing with chatter and laughter, now sat under a thick cloud of silence and fear. A line of uniformed officers had arrived mid-morning, their expressions unreadable. Flashing red and blue lights outside the hall windows had made the reality hit harder than ever. Mike was truly gone. Students sat on long benches in rows, grouped loosely by cabin. Some clung to each other, some stared off blankly, while others whispered nervously. Gina sat stiffly next to Hannah, hands clenched tightly in her lap. Across the room, Rory was bouncing his leg rapidly, trying to look anywhere but at room 4B's hallway. A tall police officer with sharp eyes and a trimmed beard stepped forward. "I'm Inspector Darren. First, I want to thank you all for staying calm. We know this is difficult, but we must understand exactly what happened last night." He glanced around. "We will be taking fingerprints and speaking to everyone one-on-one. Please cooperate fully. This is not a punishment. We are simply looking for the truth." Ms. Blakely gave a short nod of approval, arms crossed tightly over her clipboard. "The students will follow the officers one at a time. Staff will be questioned after." One by one, students were led into the smaller side room behind the kitchen. An officer stood by the door with a clipboard, reading out names. Gina Alvarez. Gina stood, her chin high, though her hands trembled slightly. She shot a glance at Hannah before disappearing behind the door. Inside, the questioning began. "State your full name," said the female officer sitting across the table. Her tone was neutral but firm. "Gina Maria Alvarez. You were close to Mike Liu, correct?" Gina nodded. "Yes, he was my best friend." "When did you last see him alive?" Gina hesitated, swallowing hard. "Last night. After dinner, around 8:30. He was sitting with Hannah and me near the campfire. Then he said he was tired and went to bed early." "Did he seem upset?" "Different." "No," she blinked quickly. "Well, maybe quieter than usual. But we thought he was just tired." The officer leaned forward. "Do you know anything about a letter found in the cabin? A handwritten note?" Gina's breath hitched. "No, I didn't know he wrote anything. Or if he did, maybe it wasn't even his." The officer made a note. "Thank you, Gina. We'll ask more if needed." Next was Zoe. He flopped into the chair, arms crossed. "So what now? You think one of us did it?" "We're not assuming anything. Just gathering facts," the officer replied calmly. "Right," Zoe muttered. "Because a bunch of 12-year-olds at a nature camp definitely sounds like a hotbed for crime." The officer didn't rise to the sarcasm. "When did you last see Mike Liu?" Dinner." "Did he seem okay?" Zoe shrugged. "Looked normal to me." Hannah walked in slowly, her gaze low. Then was Hannah. "You're Hannah Carlisle?" "Yes, sir." "You were also close to Mike." She nodded. "Did he say anything strange before going to bed last night?" Hannah's voice was barely a whisper. "No. He just smiled at me. Said he had a funny story to tell in the morning." "Did you know he was writing a letter?" "No." Next, Mike's roommate, Rory. "He's dead," Rory said, still visibly shocked. "I was asleep the whole night. I woke up and he was just lying there, face down." "Did you touch anything?" I shook his shoulder. I thought he was joking at first. Caleb and Dan's interviews. Dan was defensive from the start. I didn't even talk to Mike much. I didn't go near his cabin. The officer asked, "Did you see anything unusual last night? Other than Maya telling some dumb ghost story and Ava jumping at shadows?" "No," said Dan. Caleb rolled his eyes during his turn. "Dan and I were arguing about bedsheets. We weren't poisoning soup or writing mystery letters." And the interviews continued in this manner. All the teachers had positive things to say about Mike, despite the little turmoil he had during the activity. Ms. Blakely's responses were crisp. "We accounted for every student during head count. We had no signs of illness or distress." Mr. Hahn looked crushed. "Mike was a lovely child. I can't imagine." Ms. Collins gave practical answers, mostly about camp logistics and curfews. Ms. Rayner, arms folded, said, "Whatever happened, it was quiet. Too quiet. No sounds, no warnings." By the time the interviews ended, it was well into the evening. Everyone had given their fingerprints, and the police had secured cabin 4B with yellow tape. Inspector Darren stood before the students again. "We still don't know the cause of death. The forensics team is examining the food, the cabin, and the letter. If you remember anything, no matter how small, Tell your teachers, or us. No one spoke. The silence in the hall was heavier than ever. The bus rolled in, the same glossy yellow with the St. Mary's Academy logo on its side, the same squeaky brakes and puff of exhaust, but everything about it felt different. It was too soon, too strange, too hollow. Miss Blakely stood near the open bus door, her clipboard clutched close against her chest, her whistle hanging and used around her neck. She scanned the group of students huddled in front of the central hall. Her voice, normally clear and clipped, was softer now. "Everyone," she began, "I want you to return to your cabins and quietly gather your belongings. Pack everything. Leave nothing behind. You will return to the same seats you came in. Teachers will assist each group. Please stay calm, and if you need help, raise your hand." No one moved at first. Then slowly, one by one, the students drifted off to their rooms, some in small pairs, others completely alone. The usual chatter, arguments over socks, misplaced flashlights, or whose shampoo bottle exploded, all of it was absent. Every footstep felt heavier than it should have been. Miss Blakely gently placed a hand on Rory's shoulder. "I'll go with you," she said. Rory's face was pale, his eyes red-rimmed but dry. He didn't speak. He just nodded, and the two of them turned toward cabin 4B, its door still marked by yellow police tape, now peeling in the breeze. The caution felt more symbolic than secure. The grief and questions inside that room couldn't be taped off. The other teachers moved in silence, helping students double-check drawers and fold their sleeping bags. Ms. Jordan helped Mia zip her backpack. Mr. Hahn quietly removed a sleeping mat from beneath a bunk for Caleb. No one spoke unless necessary. In cabin 3B, Hannah and Gina packed side by side. Gina tucked her pillow into her duffel bag with shaking hands, her gaze flicking constantly to the window. Hannah folded her camp hoodie slowly, her mind replaying Mike's last smile. Neither of them said a word. Hannah picked up the pieces of stones and put it in the side of her bag. She left the room, giving it one glance in case she missed anything. Back at the bus, students loaded their things without the usual commotion. No one shouted about who sat where. No jokes, no songs. Lena quietly took her seat beside Hannah, her earlier energy replaced by a distant, dazed look. Jason sat at the back, for once not clowning around. His hands fiddled nervously with his water bottle, twisting and untwisting the cap. Dan and Caleb found their seats without a single word of rivalry. Zoe rested his head against the window, staring at the forest outside as though daring it to explain what had just happened. When Rory returned with Ms. Blakely, his bag slung over one shoulder, he didn't look at anyone. He climbed the steps and sat in the same seat he had taken when the trip began, the one next to Mike's. But this time it was empty. Mike's spot, where his jokes had come from, where his elbows had jostled, where his backpack had tumbled into the aisle, was now just an absence. The same space, but missing the soul. Ms. Collins and Ms. Jordan moved quietly down the aisle, handing out breakfast boxes, simple ham and cheese sandwiches, a hard-boiled egg, and a small carton of orange juice. A few students mumbled, "Thank you," but most took theirs with a nod or no words at all. Even Jason, the usual class clown, sat quietly chewing, his gaze fixed on the seat in front of him. Zoe accepted his breakfast with a muttered, "Thanks," then handed Mia the juice box from his tray without a word. She took it, whispering a soft barely audible. Darnell stared out the window. Caleb and Dan, once competitive about everything, now sat a row apart, silent, not even looking at one another. Ms. Blakely stood at the front of the bus. Her voice, when she spoke, was steady but heavy. "I've informed the school administration. Your parents have been contacted. They're aware we're on our way back earlier than planned." She paused, scanning the quiet bus. "I will speak to each of them personally when we arrive. Until then, I need all of you to rest. There is nothing to fear, and you are not alone." The driver turned the ignition. The bus rumbled to life. The wheels began to roll away from Silver Pines. No one looked back. Mentally and physically exhausted, slowly, one by one, the students drifted into an uneasy sleep, heads resting against windows, backpacks, or each other. Even the teachers sat in silence. Ms. Jordan leaned her head against the window pane. Tears dried on her cheeks. Mr. Hahn clutched his notebook loosely in his lap, eyes closed behind fogged glasses. Ms. Rayner, always poised and sharp, now leaned back with her arms folded, her stern expression softened by exhaustion. The only sounds were the occasional shifting of seats and the soft crinkle of empty breakfast wrappers. The world passed by in silence until a voice finally broke through it. "Kids, we're here," the bus driver announced, tapping the mic gently with his knuckle. "Time to get off." A few groans and sleepy murmurs followed as students stirred awake. Gina blinked rapidly and sat up straight. Hannah rubbed her eyes, disoriented, still tangled in the fog of her dreams. Dreams filled with laughter that ended in screaming. Rory sat up quickly, eyes darting around like he had just woken from a nightmare. The bus came to a full stop with a low hiss. But as the students slowly gathered their bags and stepped off the bus one by one, a wave of confusion spread through the group. Jason squinted at the large maroon sign by the front gate. "Wait, this isn't right." Lena looked around, confused. "This isn't Willow Creek. It says St. Mary's Academy." Ava read aloud from the gate, her voice uncertain. The teachers exchanged quick glances. Ms. Blakely's eyes widened as she stepped off the bus and looked up at the sign herself. This isn't our school." "Excuse me," Miss Collins called out to the driver, who was stepping down from the front. "Are you sure this is Willow Creek Academy?" The driver furrowed his brow. "No, ma'am. This bus is for the St. Mary's Camp Pickup. Group A. That's what the sheet said this morning. That's the group I was scheduled for." Ms. Blakely's face went pale. "We're from Willow Creek Academy. Group C." There was a pause, a beat of silence as the mistake sunk in. Some students glanced at each other, confused. Others just stood there, frozen, still not fully understanding what was going on. Zoe broke the silence with a dry, tired voice. "So, not only did we go through the most traumatic night ever, but we're also on the wrong bus?" "Seriously?" Caleb muttered, slinging his backpack over one shoulder. "Is this a joke?" Dan added, narrowing his eyes. Ms. Blakely pinched the bridge of her nose, then turned calmly to the students. "Everyone, back on the bus. Now, we'll sort this out quickly." But Jason started to say something dramatic, then stopped himself, realizing it wasn't the time. Back on the bus, Ms. Rayner called the school office while Ms. Collins started talking with the camp coordinator. Ms. Jordan did a quick head count while muttering to herself, still trying to wrap her head around the confusion. "Let me get this straight," muttered Gina to Hannah as they slumped into their seats again. "We wake up to a murder, get interrogated by police, get sent home on the wrong bus, and now we're at the wrong school." Hannah didn't respond right away. She stared out the window, her fingers tracing shapes on the foggy glass. "It's like we're in someone else's story," she whispered. Or maybe, a story that had only just begun. Mr. Hahn sat quietly at the front of the bus, his phone held close to his face as he scrolled through the map app. The signal was weak out in this part of the city, but it was enough to load the route back. After a few taps and a sigh, he turned to Ms. Blakely, who stood just behind the driver, her posture stiff and her arms crossed over her clipboard like a barrier between herself and the chaos of the morning. "It's about an hour back," Mr. Hahn said softly, offering her a glance that tried to be reassuring. "Wrong direction entirely, but at least we haven't gone too far away." Ms. Blakely exhaled slowly. "Thank God," she muttered, almost more to herself than to him. She looked out at the stillness beyond the bus windows, a school unfamiliar, quiet, and completely unrelated to the nightmare they had all just left behind. "The last thing we need is more confusion." "I already called Willow Creek," Mr. Hahn added. "They're coordinating with the camp and this school. A new bus is being arranged to meet us halfway if needed." "Good," Ms. Blakely nodded. "Let's not make the kids wait longer than they have to. They're all ready." She trailed off, swallowing the knot in her throat. Back on the bus, the students had settled into a collective silence again. Even the usually loud and restless ones, Dan, Jason, Darnell, sat quietly, heads down, eyes unfocused. Zoe leaned against the window, arms crossed, saying nothing for once. Rory stared ahead, his knees bouncing nervously. Mia and Lena shared a blanket they found tucked beneath a seat, leaning into each other for comfort. Gina sat beside Hannah, holding her own hands tightly in her lap. "I'm tired," she whispered, "but I don't even want to sleep." Hannah didn't respond. Her eyes were fixed on the back of the driver's seat, unmoving. Her mind was still replaying the moment she saw Mike's lifeless body on the floor. His fidgety hands, the way he laughed at everything, The way he once dared her to eat 3 sour candies at once just to see her reaction. All of it felt like a faded dream now, too far away to grasp, but too close to forget. Miss Collins moved down the aisle, quietly handing out water bottles to students. "Here you go, sweetheart," she said gently to Maya, who thanked her in a whisper. Meanwhile, Ms. Rayner kept close to the driver, ensuring the new route back to Willow Creek was clear and safe. The bus began to pull out of the St. Mary's lot, turning back toward the road they should have taken in the first place. As the vehicle rumbled forward again, a quiet, shaky voice rose from the middle row. "Do you think they'll ever find out what really happened?" Ava asked, eyes wide behind her glasses. No one answered. The bus hummed steadily along the highway, the soft drone of the engine blending with the rhythmic breathing of the sleeping children. Outside, the sky had shifted to a muted gray, clouds beginning to gather as the cityscape slowly rolled past. Gina had finally dozed off, her head resting against Hannah's shoulder. Hannah remained awake, eyes open but unfocused. She watched the landscape pass without really seeing it. Her thoughts, murky and relentless, circled around Mike, his grin, his constant energy, and that terrifying, motionless final image. Suddenly, a sharp thud. The bus jolted. A loud pop echoed beneath them, followed by a grinding, scraping sound. The vehicle lurched sideways for a moment, and then slowly rolled to a stop at the side of the road. Students stirred. Some jerked awake, alarmed. Others rubbed their eyes, disoriented. "What happened?" Jason muttered, sitting up and gripping the seat in front of him. "I think we hit something," Rory said, peering out the window. Dan stood and craned his neck down the aisle. "Did we crash?" "No," Ms. Blakely said firmly from the front, already standing. "Everyone, stay seated. Remain calm." The driver stepped out, muttering under his breath as he circled to the side of the bus. After a few minutes, he came back, brushing road dust off his slacks. "Rear right tires punctured," he reported. "Looks like we rolled over some broken glass. I'll have to call it in. We'll need assistance." "How long will it take?" Ms. Rayner asked, arms crossed tightly over her chest. 40 minutes, maybe an hour," he said. "Depends on how quick they get here." Mr. Hahn sighed. "I'll let Willow Creek know." As word spread, groans rippled through the students, though none were especially loud or dramatic. Even Jason didn't try to crack a joke. "I can't believe this," Zoe muttered, pressing his forehead to the window. "Can't we catch a break?" "Just our luck," Darnell added. "First a murder mystery, now a flat tire." "Darnell," Miss Collins said gently but firmly, "not the time." Rory was pacing slightly in the aisle, hands twitching as though he needed to do something. Mia and Lena sat quietly, their blanket tucked around them, eyes watching the adults for signs of reassurance. Ava clutched her water bottle, as if gripping something solid could calm her nerves. Hannah looked at Gina, who was now wide awake again. "Do you think this is all connected?" she asked in a low voice. "Like, it feels like everything's going wrong." Gina's lips parted, but she had no answer. She just shook her head slowly. Outside, a soft drizzle began to patter against the roof of the bus.